Welcome to our second episode of State of the World with me, Sally Lockwood, in Dubai.
And me, Tara Palmeri, in New York, just coming back from Washington, D.C., where, Sal, I've got to tell you, it is just completely nutty over there. How did this happen? How did the top security team for the president end up on a Signal group chat, sharing precise details of an attack on Houthi rebels? And then the national security advisor, Mike Waltz, just so happens to include a journalist, a very prominent journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg. That's how unsecure this messaging was.
Before we get into it, how gutted were you that you weren't added to the messaging?
You know, it's funny. I did find Mike Waltz's number in my phone yesterday. I was like, damn it, why wasn't it me? I wrote a piece.
I have a theory.
Why?
I have a theory. So everyone's been saying, how did Jeffrey Goldberg get added to this group? Well, Jeffrey, is kind of close in the alphabet to J.D. Vance, right? And I was thinking, Tara, probably the closest person would have been Tulsi Gabbard, right? Too far away. But seriously, in the group, there were 18 people, including Mike Waltz. Now, the group was called the Houthi PC Small Group. PC stands for Principals Committee, which essentially means the top team when it comes to some big military operation.
The group was that big. It was like sending out a mass email and not knowing who's on the chain. It was really done so recklessly. And it almost seemed like Pete Hegseth was like kind of showing off the details, like, look, boom, here, this person walking into his mistress' house. He was so proud that he was able to execute a war plan like this, because before that he was kind of just like a regular infantry guy, and then he went on to Fox News. It was almost like a boastful thing. You know, I was speaking to John Bolton, who was Trump's former national security advisor, and he said there was no reason for any of these people to be on the chat. The only person who should have been on the chat with him with these war plans was Mike Waltz. Susie Wiles, the chief of staff, didn't need to be on that chat. J.D. Vance, the vice president, CIA director John Ratcliffe, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, they would all be informed after the attack happened to be told everything was A-OK. They don't need to know the precise details, the weaponry, the timing of the attack, the location, and yet he fired it all away. But, like, of course, in the Trump White House, like, the biggest sin of all to them was not that classified documentation was being shared or classified information over a commercial app. It's like, how did the journalists get in there? Even though what Hegseth did was more likely to be a criminal offense. Like, first of all, it could be considered violating the Espionage Act by putting out this kind of sensitive information. And they all violated the Federal Records Act, which means you have to store all this information properly into the National Archives.
Just to be clear, absolutely no one's head has rolled for this, right, Tara? No one's been fired, no one's lost their job, and potentially the thing that might actually cost someone their job more than breaching national security, the fact that they had a Trump critical reporter on their phone and then added them to this group chat.
Even in Pyongyang, you would get fired for this. Like, I don't know a single capital around the world. Do you know a place where you could do this and not get fired?
Something that really stood out to me were the emojis, the language, the casual nature of it, the lack of knowledge when it comes to operational security, which, by the way, Jeffrey Goldberg showed far more knowledge when it came to what should and shouldn't be made public. When I spent 6 months embedded with the military in Afghanistan, it was drilled into me as a journalist what was operational security, and you knew what you could and couldn't publish. Right. I'll give you an example. There was one incident, there was really extreme weather, an enormous hailstorm, like hailstones the size of golf balls falling. Every single aircraft and helicopter that was not covered that night when that hailstorm hit in Kandahar was essentially damaged so badly that they couldn't be flown. It was a huge story. We were told that was operationally sensitive. It was OPSEC. We were not allowed to report that because it would give the Taliban a huge advantage. They'd be out planting IEDs, which would endanger British, American, Danish allied troops on the ground. Yeah. And, you know, that was taken extremely seriously. And experts from the UK were flown out within 24 hours to try and fix these airframes and get them airborne again. It would have been a huge story. I've actually never spoken about it before today publicly. But the fact that the Trump officials that specialize in security and intelligence were exchanging that sort of information on Signal when they have a situation room, where they have a skiff room, where they have all those secure comms was just, I thought, really, really either ignorant or arrogant.
No, yeah, reckless, I would say. I spoke to a former national security advisor official on the record, actually. He said when this kind of information is transmitted through a situation room, we have, conference calls that are secured lines. We don't transmit this kind of information lightly. For a full 24 hours after this broke, there was no question that it was classified information. This is just Trump world spin trying to say it wasn't top secret information. But it doesn't fly. People are smarter than that. I think that the American people are smart enough to know. And I think the gaslighting just makes them look worse. This is obviously top secret info. If it got in the hands of the wrong person before the strike, it would have gone completely haywire. So
it's really interesting because I've actually spoken to a senior member of the US intelligence community. He was absolutely damning about what's happened. He described it as amateur hour. And it's so funny that they have now employed the help of the world's richest man, Elon Musk, to investigate exactly how his phone number ended up on this messaging group. I mean, I can spare you the investigation. It was a clumsy thumb.
Sal, it's just save us the gaslighting.
I also think America is very proud of its military. I'm always impressed whenever I go to a supermarket in the States and there's like parking spaces for veterans, right? They're held in such high regard. Will that element that potentially American military personnel's lives could have been put at risk here, will that resonate even with Trump supporters?
Oh, absolutely, Sally. The polling so far that's come back is just like anger and incompetence across the board because, like you said, this is a red state story too. It affects everyone. It's an easy to understand story. Like, our troops could have been in danger because our top national security officials are like playing footsie with top secret information, which actually, Sally, I mean, what are people saying in the capitals around the world about this? Because I can only imagine.
Before we get onto the international reaction, just one last line from this CIA source who said to me, this is just the instance that we know about. If they're using a commercial messaging app to talk about airstrikes over Yemen, what else have they done that we don't know about? And he also said to me, if I was an ally of the United States, I'd be really asking myself if I could trust America right now.
I mean, the way they were talking about Europe is actually consistent with the way they speak about Europe publicly. So I think a lot of people were like, okay, well, it's not just a charade.
Sure.
When J.D. Vance goes into a crowd and berates European leaders, like, he actually loathes them. L-O-T-H-E caps. Loathes the Europeans. It's actually consistent. Even if you don't agree with it, it's one of the more refreshing aspects of that conversation is that actually what they say publicly is how they feel privately.
Here's some reaction I've had from a source who works inside UK intelligence. He said to me that the general feeling is that how they behaved was utterly abysmal and moronic. And he said the reality is members of the American intelligence community are really well regarded and are very hardworking, incredibly dedicated. And he said, we also don't have the luxury of not sharing intelligence with America because America gives us far more intelligence than the UK gives back, and that they simply have far more of it. He said we would be absolutely screwed without them. Yeah.
Sal, I think we've covered all bases. I doubt any heads will roll, but maybe in a few weeks from now, Mike Waltz will have to spend some more time with his family. I don't know.
We may need to update this podcast if heads do roll.
Tune in for more State of the World. Subscribe, because even if there's news that breaks over the week, we'll drop in with a short with our latest analysis.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us. Thanks again for the support. We'll see you soon.